Amina walked quietly along the edge of the royal gardens, her feet making soft sounds on the cobblestone paths. The sun was just beginning to set, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink. The air smelled of flowers, fresh earth, and something sweet she could not name. She loved wandering here when the guards were few and the servants were busy with their evening tasks. Most people in Lamora avoided the gardens, thinking them too close to the king's palace. They said the mad King Oba was dangerous and cruel. His temper was feared by everyone, and people said that even a small mistake could cost someone dearly. But Amina was not like most people. She was curious and brave. She wanted to see the gardens and, maybe, catch a glimpse of the king himself. As she stepped under an arch of flowering vines, a shadow moved quickly between the hedges. Amina froze, her heart beating faster. The shadow stopped and a man stepped out. He was tall, with broad shoulders, and his clothes were rich, yet slightly disordered, as if he had been moving quickly. His eyes were the first thing she noticed, dark, deep, and stormy, yet there was a strange loneliness in them. It was a look she had never seen before. She had read about the Mad King in stories told by her mother and father, and here he was, standing right in front of her. "Who are you?" the man asked, his voice sharp but not unkind. It held a strange curiosity. I am Amina," she replied softly, bowing her head slightly. "I did not mean to intrude. I just wanted to see the gardens." The man studied her for a moment, his eyes narrowing, then widening slightly. "Most people would not dare to walk here alone. You are not afraid?" Amina shook her head. "I have no reason to be afraid. I mean no harm." He gave a small, almost invisible smile, but it did not reach his eyes entirely. "Few speak like that to me. People usually run or they lie." Amina felt a small shiver run down her spine, but she stood her ground. There was something magnetic about him, something that made her heart beat faster and yet calm her at the same time. She realized that despite the stories, he was not just a man filled with rage. There was something deeper, something almost human that people rarely saw. "Why do they call you the Mad King?" she asked, her voice careful, yet filled with curiosity. He looked at her for a long moment. Then, almost as if deciding whether she was safe, he spoke. "Because I do not follow their rules. Because I do not care for the court's whispers. Because I act as I feel. Madness is what they call what they do not understand." Amina tilted her head, thinking about his words. Maybe they are wrong about you. Maybe they only see what they want to see. Oba's lips curved into a faint smile. "Perhaps. You are different from the others, Amina. Most people fear me without even knowing me." She laughed quietly, a sound like the soft rustle of leaves in the wind. "Maybe fear is easier than trying to understand." For a moment, neither spoke. The wind moved gently through the garden, carrying the scent of roses and jasmine. Birds were returning to their nests, and the sun was sinking lower, casting long shadows across the paths. Amina felt as if the garden itself was holding its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Finally, Oba stepped closer, his gaze still fixed on her. "You are bold," he said. "Most would have run at the first glance of me. Or at least spoken with trembling lips." "I do not run from people," she said. "Not from anyone." His eyes softened slightly, but a flicker of something wild remained. "And yet, you are here in my garden at this hour when most are asleep. You are brave or foolish?" "Perhaps both," she said with a small smile. "But I prefer brave." He chuckled, a deep, rare sound that echoed softly among the walls of the garden. "Bravery can be dangerous. But I think you do not care." Amina shook her head. "I care only about what is right and about truth. I do not care about danger if it keeps me from seeing what I need to see." Oba regarded her silently, and for the first time, Amina thought she saw a flicker of something tender in his eyes. He was not only the Mad King. He was a man with thoughts, with loneliness, with secrets no one had seen. And somehow he had allowed her to see a part of it. "Do you know," Oba said quietly, "that most people in my kingdom will hate you for being here? For speaking to me?" "I do not care what they think," she replied honestly. "I care only about truth and kindness and understanding." He seemed to consider her words, then nodded slowly. "Perhaps that is why I find myself curious about you, Amina. Most people do not speak like that. Most people are afraid or blind or too careful." She smiled, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. There was something strange about this moment, something magical. It was as if the garden itself had created a space where fear and danger could not exist, where two people from different worlds could meet and speak honestly. Oba took a step back, then another, and finally turned toward a small fountain at the center of the garden. Water sparkled in the last rays of the sun. I have not laughed in many days, he said softly. Not like this. Not with anyone. Amina looked at him, surprised. Why not? Because people expect me to be cruel. They expect me to be mad. They expect me to push them away. But you are different. You see me as I am, not as the world says I am. She approached the fountain slowly, keeping her eyes on him. Perhaps that is because I know that even the fiercest hearts can be gentle. That even the wildest souls can want love and understanding. He looked at her closely, and for the first time, his expression softened completely. There was no anger, no fury, only a quiet sadness mixed with curiosity. You are fearless, Amina, he said. And yet, there is something about you that is careful. You are not reckless, not like the others who dare approach me. You see me, but you also measure the world. That is rare. Amina nodded. I do not seek trouble. But I do seek truth. And I think you are worth knowing, Oba, not for your title, but for yourself. He studied her for a long time, as if memorizing every detail, every line of her face, every spark in her eyes. Finally he spoke again, softer this time. Perhaps you are the first person in my life to see me as more than a story. More than a legend. More than a king. She smiled, feeling a strange mix of excitement and fear. Then perhaps we can see each other as we truly are. Not as the world demands, but as we choose to see ourselves. The garden grew quieter. The sun dipped below the horizon, and the first stars began to appear. Amina realized she had been speaking with the king for hours, yet it felt like minutes. There was a strange connection between them, something electric and real, something she could not explain but felt deeply in her chest. Oba finally broke the silence. You should leave soon, Amina. The night grows dark and the palace will begin to search for you. I know, she said softly. But I will return. Tomorrow if I may. And the day after and the day after that. Until I know whether you are truly the man behind the stories. He looked at her, eyes shining faintly with a mixture of amusement and something tender. Perhaps you will be the only one to understand me. The only one. Amina nodded. Then I will try. For as long as I am able. After their first meeting in the royal garden, Amina could not stop thinking about Oba. His stormy eyes, the strange mix of anger and loneliness, and the soft moments of kindness he had shown her haunted her thoughts. She felt a pull she could not explain, a force that drew her toward him despite the warnings of her family and friends. The palace and the king's reputation were dangerous, but Amina was not one to run from life. She wanted to know him, not the mad king the court whispered about, but the man who had seemed so alive in the garden that evening. Oba, too, found himself thinking of Amina. He could not understand why a woman would dare to walk into his garden and speak to him with such honesty. Most people feared him, avoided him, or whispered lies about his temper. But Amina, she saw him. She saw beyond his title, beyond the anger, beyond the madness. And for the first time in many years he wanted to see her again. They began meeting in secret. Early in the mornings, before the palace guards fully woke, Amina would slip into the gardens. Oba would already be there, pacing slowly among the hedges or sitting by the fountain, waiting. Sometimes he would greet her with a sharp glance, a test to see if she was brave enough to come. And she always was. She never faltered, never hesitated. Her calm presence was like a quiet river beside the king's stormy mind, steady and soothing. At first their meetings were short, cautious. Amina would ask simple questions about his day, about the gardens, about the palace life she had never seen. Oba would answer, sometimes sharply, sometimes in surprising detail, showing a side of himself that no one in the court had ever known. They would walk along the stone paths, watching the flowers bloom, listening to the birds as they returned to their nests. These walks were small, ordinary moments, but to them they were extraordinary. Over time they began to share stories. Amina spoke of her village, of her childhood, of the simple joys of life outside the palace walls. She told him about the river near her home, the soft grass she loved to lie on, the small market where she would trade cloth and food. Oba listened, sometimes quietly, sometimes laughing at her small jokes. He had not laughed like this in years. Her words were a bridge between him and a world he had long forgotten existed. Oba, in turn, told her stories of his childhood before he became king. He spoke of his father, the stern old king who ruled with fear and strict rules, and of his mother, who had died when he was young. He told her about the loneliness that came with power, the endless days filled with politics, whispers, and distrust. He told her about the anger that sometimes consumed him, and how he felt trapped in the crown he had inherited. Amina listened without judgment. She never looked away from his eyes, never faltered in her attention, and never shied from his truths. It was during these secret meetings that something unexpected began to grow between them. Laughter replaced fear. Conversation replaced caution. Their hearts began to recognize a connection that was deeper than words, a bond that neither could fully understand. Amina discovered a side of Oba that the world had never seen, the man behind the king, the human behind the legend. And Oba discovered in Amina a light that softened his darkness, a warmth that melted the edges of his fury. But the world outside the gardens did not remain silent. Whispers reached the court. Ministers and servants noticed the changes in Oba. He seemed distracted, less cruel at times, and occasionally absent from his usual routines. Rumors spread of a mysterious woman who had entered the king's life, someone who was not of noble birth yet commanded the king's attention. Some warned that she was dangerous, that she might be using the king, that she could destroy the kingdom with her influence. Others whispered that Oba had gone mad, that love, or obsession, had taken him completely. Despite the warnings, neither Amina nor Oba could stay apart. Their bond had become a force neither could resist. The palace walls, the court's whispers, the danger, it all seemed to fade when they were together. Amina's calm presence balanced Oba's chaos. Where he was reckless, she was careful. Where he was impulsive, she was patient. And yet, in her patience he found excitement. In her calm he found freedom. One evening, under a sky painted with the colors of sunset, Oba took Amina to a hidden part of the garden she had never seen. It was a small grove enclosed by tall hedges with a pond reflecting the sky. The place felt magical, untouched by the rules of the palace or the expectations of the court. He turned to her, his eyes softer than she had ever seen. "Do you know," he said quietly, "that I have never trusted anyone like this before?" "Never." Amina shook her head, her voice gentle. "I do not know Oba. But I think you want to trust. You just do not know how yet." He studied her, and she could see a flicker of vulnerability, quickly hidden behind his usual storm. "I do not know if I can trust anyone again. Not truly. People have always betrayed me, laughed at me, feared me. I will not betray you," she said simply. "I am not afraid of who you are, Oba. I am here because I choose to be, not because I am forced, not because I am afraid. I choose you." He looked at her for a long time, then slowly nodded. Perhaps that is why I cannot let you go. Even if the court hates this, even if the world sees us as dangerous, I cannot." Amina felt her heart race. She realized that in that moment she had begun to love him, not the mad king of stories but the man she now knew. And she knew that Oba too felt something powerful and dangerous for her. The nights grew longer and their meetings continued. They shared stolen moments by the pond, whispered conversations under the trees, and laughter that echoed softly in the empty gardens. Sometimes they would sit together in silence, listening to the wind and the water, feeling the strange peace that came from being together. They knew the court would never understand. They knew that their bond was forbidden. And yet they could not stop. The palace of Lamora was always full of whispers, but now the whispers carried a sharper edge. The court was unsettled, and the ministers had begun to notice a change in the king. Oba's gaze lingered too long on empty corners, his temper flared at minor mistakes, and sometimes he seemed lost in thought, staring at nothing for hours. Rumors of a mysterious woman who had entered the king's life had begun to spread, and the court feared the consequences. The ministers called secret meetings, huddling in dark corridors and quiet chambers. "The king is distracted," one said. "He is no longer thinking of the kingdom. He is thinking only of her. She cannot be trusted," another whispered. "We do not know her. She is not noble. She could be plotting against us, against the king, against the kingdom." Oba had heard parts of the whispers. He had always known that people were afraid of him, but now the fear was sharpened with suspicion. He was not blind to the signs, the lingering looks, the secret murmurs, the careful questioning. Yet, when he thought of Amina, none of it mattered. She had become a part of his thoughts, a constant presence in the chaos of his mind. One evening the council called him to a meeting. The great hall was filled with ministers, their faces serious, their voices sharp. Oba sat at the head of the long table, his hands resting on the carved wood. The air was thick with tension. "You must be careful, Your Majesty," said one minister. "This woman, Amina, is not of the court. She is not noble. Her influence could lead the kingdom into ruin. You cannot trust her." Oba's eyes flared. "And what would you know of trust? You who follow rules blindly, who fear every shadow and whisper. You do not see what I see. You do not understand her. You do not understand me." The council murmured uneasily and another minister spoke up, his voice trembling slightly. "Sire, we only wish to protect the kingdom. We cannot have the king distracted by someone who may be dangerous. This is not a matter of anger. This is a matter of duty." Oba slammed his hand on the table, the sound echoing through the hall. "Duty? Duty does not command my heart. Duty does not know the truth of life. I will not be told whom to love, or whom to trust, or whom to see. This council has no power over me." The ministers fell silent. Oba's temper had always been feared, and now it raged like a storm in the hall. They could say nothing further without risking his wrath. After the meeting, Oba walked alone in the palace corridors, his steps echoing. His mind was in turmoil, caught between the fury of the council and the calm presence of Amina in his thoughts. She had become the only thing that made sense to him, the only thing that softened the harshness of his life. He could not send her away, yet the council's warnings pressed heavily on him. That night, Amina came to the palace gardens as she often did. She had sensed the change in him, the tension in his voice and the sharpness in his gaze. She found him pacing near the fountain, his hands tangled in his hair, his eyes dark with anger and worry. "Oba," she said softly, stepping closer. "What troubles you so?" He stopped and looked at her, the storm in his eyes reflected in her own. "The council, they will not leave me alone. They say you are dangerous. They say you are not to be trusted. They demand I send you away." Amina's heart ached, but she did not flinch. "They do not understand us," she said. "They do not understand what we have. They see only danger because they are afraid. But we cannot let fear rule our hearts." Oba shook his head, his voice low and trembling with frustration. "I do not know what to do. I cannot ignore the council forever. They will act if I do nothing. And yet, I cannot let you go. I will not." Amina reached for his hand, holding it firmly. "Then we must be clever. Love can survive if we are clever, if we plan. If we are careful, no one can separate us. We can find a way to stay together." Oba stared at her, searching her eyes. He saw determination, courage, and a quiet wisdom he had never seen in anyone before. He realized she was right. Love could survive, but only if they were clever, only if they were willing to risk everything. "Then what shall we do?" he asked finally, his voice softening. "Tell me your plan." Amina smiled faintly. "We need to be cautious. We must meet only where no one can see. We must hide our letters, our meetings, and our paths. We must make the world believe we are apart while we are together. We must be invisible until the time is right." Oba nodded slowly, the tension in his shoulders easing slightly. "I will do anything," he said. "Anything to keep you by my side." She leaned closer. "Then we begin tonight. Every step must be careful. Every word must be measured. And yet, we must never forget why we do this. Not for power, not for gold, not for the court, but for each other. That is what will keep us strong." Oba's eyes softened, and for the first time that evening, he allowed himself to imagine a life with her, a life where they could be together without fear. But reality quickly returned, reminding him of the danger. The council's eyes were everywhere, and any mistake could cost them both dearly. That night, as the palace slept, Amina devised a careful plan. She studied the palace gates, the guard schedules, the secret passages she had discovered during her earlier visits. She traced the paths they could use to meet safely, marking hiding spots and safe corners. She also prepared a way for messages, small notes hidden in flowers or tucked under loose stones in the garden. Every detail had to be precise, every step deliberate. Oba watched her work in silence, admiring her careful mind. He had always relied on his power and strength, but here he realized that intelligence and strategy were more valuable than any sword or decree. Amina's mind was their shield, her courage their armor. For several nights they practiced their plan, moving silently through the gardens, avoiding guards and learning to communicate in subtle ways. They spoke in whispers, touched hands only when they were sure no one watched, and shared secret smiles that carried the weight of their love. Every meeting strengthened their bond, and every careful step strengthened their resolve. Yet danger lurked close. One evening, a guard noticed a shadow near the fountain and called out. Oba's temper flared instantly, and he moved with dangerous speed to cover Amina, his presence alone causing the guard to hesitate. But Amina remained calm, guiding Oba away with quiet gestures, showing him that patience could save them where anger might destroy. They realized then that their bond was both a blessing and a risk. Every secret meeting deepened their love, but every moment carried the possibility of discovery. And yet neither could turn back. They were caught in a storm of passion and danger, a storm they could not escape and did not wish to escape. Amina often looked at Oba and saw the man behind the madness, while Oba looked at Amina and saw courage and light. Together they were learning how to survive the world's eyes, how to hide in plain sight, and how to make love stronger than fear. Each night, their plan became more precise, their movements more careful, and their trust in each other more absolute. And though the council grew suspicious, though the palace whispered and watched, though danger waited in every shadow, they pressed on. The night was darker than usual, with clouds covering the silver moon and a quiet wind moving through the castle walls. Amina and Oba met in the shadowed garden, where the roses seemed to bend closer as if they knew the secret about to unfold. The air was heavy with tension, yet filled with a strange kind of hope. They both knew that this night could change everything. There was no turning back. Amina held Oba's hand, her fingers steady and warm. "Are you ready?" she whispered. Her voice was calm, though her heart beat quickly. She had thought of this moment for weeks, planning every step, every path, every way to avoid the guards. Oba looked at her, his stormy eyes softened by trust and love. "I am ready," he said. "With you I will face anything. No matter what comes, I follow you." She nodded, a small smile touching her lips. Together they slipped through a hidden door behind the fountain. It was a door few people knew about, concealed by ivy and shadows. Amina pushed it open quietly, revealing a narrow stone tunnel that led beneath the castle walls. The air smelled damp, cool and earthy. It was a strange feeling for Oba, walking in silence through passages he had never known existed in his own palace. The tunnel wound like a serpent, narrow at first and then widening into small chambers that might once have served as storage rooms. Amina led the way, moving quickly but carefully. Oba followed, his hand never leaving hers. The sound of their footsteps echoed faintly, but there was no danger yet. They had practiced this in secret for days, memorizing the paths and the times when guards changed shifts. Every shadow, every turn, every echo was already known to Amina. Outside the castle walls, the night air was cooler and freer. Stars peeked through gaps in the clouds and the wind whispered through the trees. Amina guided Oba along hidden paths she had discovered as a child, paths that twisted through the hills and forests surrounding the kingdom. They moved silently, stepping over roots, climbing low fences and avoiding the main roads. The world outside the palace seemed alive and quiet at the same time, watching them, almost protecting them. Oba kept glancing around, his mind alert. "If anyone finds us, they will say I am mad. They will say I have been kidnapped or bewitched," he said quietly, almost to himself. Amina smiled faintly. "Let them say what they want. We are free even if only for a moment. They cannot control us here. They cannot see us. And that is enough." As they moved deeper into the forest, the sounds of the palace faded, replaced by the gentle rustle of leaves and the distant call of an owl. Amina had chosen this path carefully. It was long and difficult, but it avoided the main roads and the patrols. Every step required care, every movement had to be precise. Oba realized how brave she truly was, not only in facing danger but in guiding him through it, confident and calm. Hours passed. The first light of dawn began to touch the edges of the sky, painting it with soft pink and orange. They climbed a hill and from the top, the kingdom lay behind them, the castle towers barely visible through the morning mist. Oba felt a strange mix of relief and fear. The world he knew, the throne he had inherited, and the people he ruled were now behind him. What lay ahead was unknown. But for the first time in his life he felt free. Amina took his hand again, leading him down the hill. "Soon we will reach the village where no one knows us," she said softly. "There we can rest, hide and plan our next steps. No one will find us there." Oba looked at her, his heart full. "You have risked everything for me," he said. "For us. I do not know if I deserve this, but I will follow you to the end of the world if I must." She shook her head. "We deserve this, Oba. We deserve to be together even if the world thinks it is impossible. Love is worth the risk. And we are clever enough to survive it." By the time they reached the village hidden in the forest, the sun had risen fully. The village was small, quiet and untouched by the news of the palace. Smoke rose gently from chimneys, and the sound of early morning work could be heard in the distance. Amina led Oba to a small house at the edge of the village, one she had prepared in secret. Inside there were simple furnishings, food stored carefully and warm blankets. It was humble but it was safe. Oba let out a breath he did not know he had been holding. "We have done it," he said, a faint smile on his face. "We are truly free." Amina smiled back, though worry lingered in her eyes. "We are free but we must remain careful. The court will search for us. Rumors will spread. They will think of abduction, magic, madness or worse. But if we stay hidden and if we are clever, we can survive. And one day, perhaps we can return when the time is right. Meanwhile, back in the palace, chaos erupted. The king was missing. The guards had searched the gardens and the halls, calling out for Oba and the mysterious woman they had heard about. Ministers argued violently over what should be done. Some demanded that a search party be sent immediately. Others feared what the world would say if the mad king disappeared entirely. Whispers spread like wildfire. He has been taken by magic. Perhaps he has gone mad. The woman has bewitched him. But no one knew the truth. Oba's disappearance caused panic among the nobles. The kingdom had never seen the king vanish so completely. Rumors spread beyond the walls of Lamora, reaching neighboring lands. Traders spoke of a king who disappeared with a young woman, of madness, of strange and secretive love. Some believed it was dangerous magic. Others believed it was a rebellion against the crown. But everywhere the story traveled, no one knew the truth, because the truth was far stranger than anyone could imagine. Inside their hidden house, Oba and Amina stayed close, sharing quiet moments. They spoke little, letting the morning sunlight filter through the windows, letting the soft sounds of the village soothe their nerves. Each knew the danger that awaited if they were discovered, but for now they allowed themselves to breathe, to rest, and to feel the first fragile taste of freedom. Oba looked at Amina and said quietly, "No one will ever believe this story. The mad king vanished and no one knows why. But I know why. And I will never forget it. You saved me. You saved both of us." Amina placed her hand on his cheek. "And you saved me, Oba. By trusting me, by walking with me through danger, by believing in us. This is only the beginning. We will survive together no matter what the world thinks." They spent the day planning carefully. Amina showed Oba the paths in the forest, where they could go if someone came searching. She taught him how to remain unseen, how to move quietly, and how to trust the villagers who knew nothing of the palace. Oba, who had always relied on power and fear to control the world, now relied on love, trust, and strategy. He realized that this life, though difficult and uncertain, was richer and freer than anything the crown had offered. As evening approached, they watched the sky turn gold and purple. The palace was far behind them, the rumors and fears echoing only faintly. The court was in chaos, the kingdom confused and searching, but here in the quiet forest, they could feel a strange peace. They had risked everything and it had worked. They had disappeared without a trace, leaving behind a world that had tried to control them, a world that had never understood their love. Years passed since Amina and Oba had vanished from the kingdom of Lamora. The palace and the court had never fully recovered from the shock of their disappearance. Ministers whispered stories in quiet corridors, the guards remembered the empty garden and the silent halls, and the people of the kingdom told tales to their children about the mad king and the mysterious woman who had stolen his heart. No one knew the truth, and the truth became a legend. In the hidden village and later the small kingdom they built far from Lamora, life went on quietly but full of meaning. Amina and Oba had worked hard to create a home where no one could find them, where no one could judge them, and where they could live freely. They had chosen a place surrounded by forests and rivers, with hills that rose high enough to see the distant lands. Here they could see the sun rise and set without interference, feel the wind in their hair, and listen to the quiet songs of birds without fear. Oba, who had once been feared for his anger and madness, discovered a new side of himself in this freedom. He learned patience, and he learned to care not only for himself but for the people who chose to live in the hidden kingdom with them. Amina, who had always been brave and clever, became the queen of this secret land, guiding Oba and helping him rule with wisdom instead of fear. Together they built a small, thriving community, full of people who respected them for their courage and their kindness. Even though they had left the kingdom of Lamora, news of them traveled slowly, carried by travelers, merchants, and wandering storytellers. Some said that the mad king had disappeared because of magic. Others whispered that he had gone mad, running away with a woman who had bewitched him. Few could imagine the truth, that love had driven them to take control of their own lives, to escape fear and expectation, and to create a place where they could be together freely. Amina often walked through the gardens they had planted in their hidden kingdom. These gardens were larger than those at the palace, filled with flowers and trees from all over the land. She would touch the petals and smile, thinking of the first garden where she had met Oba, where their story had begun. Oba would stand beside her, sometimes in silence, sometimes telling stories of the past, of their childhoods, and of the people they had loved and lost. These moments reminded them both of how far they had come, how dangerous their love had once been, and how precious it had become. Oba learned to listen more than he spoke. He had once relied on his power and anger to control his surroundings, but in the hidden kingdom he learned that strength was not in fear, but in love, respect, and understanding. He ruled not as a king demanding obedience, but as a partner with Amina, sharing responsibility, and caring for those who lived under their protection. The villagers respected him because he had changed, because he had learned from the love of the woman who had refused to leave him even when danger was near. Stories of their daring escape and secret life began to take on a magical quality. Travelers who passed through the outer lands spoke of a kingdom that appeared only to those who searched with pure hearts. They told of a fierce king who had once been feared and a wise queen who guided him, living in harmony in a land hidden by forests and rivers. Some claimed to have seen glimpses of them from afar, standing together in the sunlight, smiling at the world that could not reach them. Children grew up hearing tales of their bravery, and young couples dreamed that their love could be as strong and clever as Amina and Oba's. Amina and Oba rarely left their hidden kingdom. They had no need for titles, no need for gold, no need for the judgment of strangers. Their happiness was enough. They spent their days tending to the people who had found them, teaching them, and creating a life that was full but safe. They celebrated the small moments, the birth of children in the village, the harvest of crops, the first snow of winter, and the warm sun of summer. Every moment was precious because it was chosen, not forced, and it belonged to them together. Evenings were their favorite time. They would sit near the river that ran along the edge of their kingdom, holding hands, speaking in soft voices, or simply listening to the sounds of the night. Sometimes Oba would look at Amina and remember the garden at the palace, their first meeting, and the nights they had risked everything to be together. He would marvel at her bravery, at the cleverness that had guided them through danger, and at the strength of her heart that had never wavered. Amina, in turn, would think of Oba and how much he had changed. Once feared by everyone for his anger and madness, he had learned love, patience, and trust. She knew that it had been her courage, combined with his willingness to follow his heart, that had allowed them to survive. Together they had not only survived, they had built something stronger, something lasting, something that could become a story for generations. Their love was no longer hidden, but it was quiet, private, and powerful. They had faced the danger of the court, the fear of the kingdom, and the rumors of the world. They had overcome every obstacle not through magic or force, but through trust, courage, and cleverness. And in doing so they had created a legend. Merchants and travelers who heard the story would carry it across the lands. Sometimes it became exaggerated, magical, or strange, but the heart of the story remained the same. A young woman and a king had defied fear, rules, and danger to be together. They had disappeared without a trace and created a life that was free, brave, and full of love. People told the story to their children as a lesson, that love could conquer fear, that courage and cleverness could overcome danger, and that sometimes the most daring acts were the ones of the heart.